Let's get to it. Hi, I'm Casey, and welcome to 15-Minute Marketing, a podcast that bucks the traditional trends of B2B and B2C marketing and replaces them with H2H, or human-to-human, all in 15 minutes or less. Today, we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects of all time, pop culture marketing. We're living in a day and age where millennials, primarily the traditional definition of millennials, which is 1981 to 1996, are making up the majority of the buying power in the world. It also just so happens that this generation, my generation, was and still is heavily influenced by pop culture. We're the generation that took the word nerd and made it cool. In this episode, you'll get some insight as to what pop culture marketing is, how it's applied, and why it's so psychologically successful. It speaks to the human in all of us, and that's the true power. So, let's get to it. What is pop culture marketing? Pop culture marketing is simply using popular things in culture, as the name states, to catch the eyes of your potential customers and nudge them to your brand. That might be a little too on the nose, but that's what definitions are supposed to be. So these are things like movies. For example, the entire Marvel franchise, the entire Star Wars franchise, video games. Nintendo has been crack shot at this throughout the years with their Mario properties and their Zelda properties, and then the exclusive properties on PlayStation as well as Xbox. Video game culture is huge for pop culture right now. Sports, we just got done with the big game. Can't say the name because trademark things. TV shows, The Office, Parks and Recs, Game of Thrones, those sorts of things. Music, actually our video production guy, Zach, has the most developed music knowledge, and the pop culture discussions we get to have in the office just solely based on that are incredible. And brands in general can actually contribute to pop culture. You think about things like Coca-Cola or Nike. They're huge brands. You know, if we go to the female side of things, your Louis Vuitton, your Coach, these are brands that quite literally influence pop culture. As a matter of fact, you can hear a lot of different rappers or singers talk about their Louis Vuittons or their Jordans, or, there's a lot of liquor brands that have that same sort of effect to where they're being mentioned in pop culture based solely on the brands. And if you're a UFC fan or an MMA fan, you start to see the lines kind of blurring. I know Conor McGregor is big on this with his Proper 12 whiskey. The brands start to influence each other across multiple channels and mediums, and that kind of influences it. And if you think about Nike too, Nike is such a big brand that you know this if you're an NCAA fan at all. Nike is literally making the University of Oregon into a marketing machine. I think it's some NCAA fans will totally grill me for this, but Nike has allowed over 100 different uniform combinations for the University of Oregon's football team, and it's 100% a big marketing machine, and all of that has to do with pop culture influencing. So that kind of brings us to, how is pop culture marketing applied in the market? Let's take a little bit of a step back. We'll look at history a little bit. So 1950s come along, and the prominent tobacco company Marlboro is kind of looking for a new way to put their imaging out there, right? At this point in time, a good amount of America smokes, but they want to be the chief brand in all of this. So in comes the classic Marlboro Man. Just think about it. If you're a little bit younger and you don't know who the Marlboro Man is, pull up another tab, pull up the Google machine, and look up Marlboro Man. You will see that the Marlboro Man was a completely cultural icon in the 1950s, 1960s, even on up to the 1970s. So you're thinking, okay, well, this is the 1950s. The internet doesn't exist. Pop culture is really not that spreadable. How did Marlboro do it? And why did they use the Marlboro Man? Well, in the 1950s, kids, listen up here, John Wayne was a huge thing. John Wayne acted in a lot of different Westerns, and Western movie culture was all the rage and phenomenon. So Marlboro took that image, realizing that it's very, very relatable to people, and they created the Marlboro Man. And for the next 30 years, they owned the tobacco industry. So that's one really good example of how it was applied. Another good one is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola started using Santa Claus in their advertisements and in their marketing. Santa Claus is a property that's known all around the world. Coca-Cola made Santa Claus associated with Coca-Cola, and they continue to do that to this day. So they're using pop culture all the way from the 1950s on to now. As a matter of fact, that has even influenced like collector culture. You can literally go to any antique store and you're probably going to find a Coca-Cola Santa Claus related item sitting there. There's people who literally have whole collections of this stuff. My aunts have tons of Coca-Cola Christmas stuff, and it's great. So the simple answer as to why pop culture marketing is so accelerated today as it was back compared to what it was back then is that we have the internet now. We have the IoT, the Internet of Things. Everything is way more accessible, and it creates kind of a sense of virality. Of course, virality and popularity hand in hand here. So everything popular can be used to brand. You just have to kind of be coy about it, because if you don't, Lars Ulrich is probably going to inevitably come after you and try suing you for trademark titles, logos, and footage. And if you don't know why I'm talking about Lars Ulrich in this, look up Napster. So some big pop culture properties that are used in marketing, Star Wars, Disney princesses, more recently HBO properties like Game of Thrones, The Office, which is huge, a lot of people do that, Will Ferrell movies. And WWE has had a really, really big extension of this, using characters like Hulk Hogan and The Rock and Stone Cold. They all kind of play into it. So the reason pop culture marketing works is because it has a lot to do with the psychology of human-to-human connection. Pop culture works psychologically because it's something that brings everyone together. It allows us all to feel things like outside of what the world is telling us is acceptable, and it allows us to do that with millions of other people around the world. It's similar in the way of how stand-up comedians are often some of the most emotionally damaged people, but they heal through humor. So we all connect as a community through pop culture. It gives us something to talk about that kind of binds us, and it's safe because there really isn't much about it that divides us to the same level of, say, social issues or politics. It's because of that type of psychological effect that pop culture gives us the positive, like, good vibes that we can put into more of an agreeable mood. And if you know anything about marketing and sales, agreeable people are much easier to market and sell to. Some of the brands that have really created a pop culture within themselves and use that as a success, literally turning their brands into pop culture icons. They span multiple verticals and tons of different revenue streams, but anyone listening to this podcast probably isn't quite to that point yet. So some ones to emulate, some ones that I saw examples of. So Sarah McLachlan, back in the 90s, did an ASPCA commercial. And that literally repopularized her song Arms of an Angel. And the people use that memory to kind of recreate. So recently in the big game because I can't say the SB word. Busch Beer used her in a commercial, and it was hilarious. It went viral. It continues to pop up. Great use of it. The 1984 Apple commercial, Super Bowl commercial for Macintosh, which was based off of the Orson Welles book, 1984, so pop culture tie-in there. That had been parodied by Futurama. It's been re-parodied. I think Barack Obama used it in one of their campaigns in 2008. So pop culture continues to be prevalent, and companies are literally making themselves into pop culture. So I think back to the early days of like Vine and YouTube. So as you watch this, you'll know that I'm a big South Park fan. And in 2008, which was season 12, episode 4, the episode Canada on Strike was quite literally a commentary on virality and how it can't translate to marketing. So they had people on there like the Chocolate Rain guy and Star Wars kid with his lightsaber or the laughing baby. And the whole idea with it is that the episode parodies how internet popularity doesn't directly transfer into any money. Now, platforms do pay their creators, but back then you had to actually parlay that fame into money in a different way. So back in the early days of Vine and YouTube, people would have never guessed that 15 years later, they'd still be cultural icons. Now brands continue to use these early iconic and unintentional influencers to build their own brands. And it goes back, it's not necessarily always in the current now, it's also retro. Pepsi Perfect, which if you've never heard of, was used in the 1980s cult classic Back to the Future, actually produced a Pepsi Perfect on October 21st, 2015, which, again, if you're a Back to the Future fan, is the date that Marty travels into the future. Genius. They actually produced it. People bought into it. A lot of different collectors. That's a really, really great way to do it. But so how do you kind of fit it in? Adjust your own brand to fit into pop culture events. You can do this by using quotes. You can use this by using different color schemes. There's a lot of different ways to not necessarily use a trademark, but to kind of dance around it. Some great opportunities to do this. One of my personal favorites, I look forward to May 4th every year because it's Star Wars Day. Okay? May the 4th be with you. Get it? Just using a Star Wars quote within your own office, something like that, making a graphic, producing it, have fun with it. Have fun with it. And I'm not talking about using billboards or TV commercials for this kind of stuff, but more so molding it into your social media postings and anything that's considered brand forward from your marketing strategy. Parodying things is a really great way to do it as well. Everybody's fans of The Office. So if you can find a way to parody a scene in The Office with your own office, that starts to get heads. That starts to make human-to-human connection because truly, that's what you're trying to do, and that's how you get people to be fans of your brand. So we end every episode of 15-Minute Marketing by presenting you a Do It Now challenge, something that you can take and immediately apply to your own marketing work. Today's Do It Now challenge is to take something in pop culture, be it recent, like let's say WrestleMania or The Mandalorian is coming out soon, or something retro like Tony Nash's favorite, Rocky. Take something related to pop culture and create a social media post surrounding it. By doing this, you'll connect your audience and potential customers to a more humanized side of your brand. Recently, AZEE did the Owasso Chocolate Walk, and we actually used the viral Chocolate Rain YouTube video to make a limited time t-shirt design. They sold like hotcakes. We had a Fabio impersonator come in, because of romance and all. So do something similar to that. Do it now And I guarantee you'll have a captivating post for your audience to share in, thusly bringing a sense of comfort to them along your brand. Thanks for tuning in to the 15-minute marketing podcast and hanging out with me. If you've got a topic you'd like to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. You can always email me at casey@azeebiz.com or just leave a comment. Part of being a human with one another is having a two-way dialogue, and this podcast could never exist without you. So truly, thank you. And remember that at the root of B2B and B2C is always human to human. Let's get to it.